Greetings and welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello.
How are you this week?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to this one. I mean, not that I don't look forward to the other ones, but I'm particularly looking forward to this one.
No, thank you for the clarification there. That's very much appreciated. Good. Well, this week we are carrying our little sojourn through with the Beatles, which means we are covering the third track on the album, All My Loving. And we might as well just get started with it. So, what do you think of this one?
Well, you know what? This is one of those early ones that's lasted. And there's a reason why it's lasted in that it's a bit of a classic, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't really go that far wrong with this one, I don't think.
You know, doing a little bit of reading around the subject, of course, it's one of those things that people seem to think that if it had been released as a single, it probably would have done really well. And that's kind of how I think of it as well. It's one of those Beatles songs that could easily have been a single. But of course, then when you start looking at it in that context, you think actually there's an awful lot of this that is very sort of familiar early Beatles, but it does seem to do some new stuff as well. And in particular, I'm talking about the lack, certainly for the first half of the song, of harmonies. It's all Paul.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's a very Paul-driven song, but there's a lot of aspects to this where I think you can really tell that the confidence of the band has greatly increased. There's a real joie de vivre about it. It's a very perky little song, and it's very forward driving. But a lot of the kind of props of the older kind of style of the Beatles aren't there. So, for example, I think if this had been recorded or written for Please Please Me, it would almost certainly have a harmonica on it. There's no harmonica. There's no harmonica on this, which is a good thing. But also, it doesn't need it. But the song has enough confidence to not have them fall back on those kind of familiar props. And so when you see it's kind of familiar aspects, but it's moving forward, I think that's kind of one example of it. It doesn't need those familiar trappings, even although much of what we have here is kind of arranged in familiar patterns.
Am I right in thinking as well that the vocals, especially at the start, are double tracked? It sounds like it.
Yeah, they're really clearly double tracked. Yes,
because I mean it seemed clear to me, and my ears are not really that good for this sort of thing, that you've got those two voices in there, but it's Paul. And it's Paul singing with Paul, and there's no harmonisation there as well. It's just giving it a kind of like a, some body instead.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying I don't have my complete Beatles recording sessions to hand, unfortunately, so I can't completely confirm this, but I think it sounds like it's ADT, artificial double tracking.
Okay.
So it's the same vocals split over two tracks in the recording process, slightly out of phase. And probably panned slightly wide in the stereo picture, which gives that double vocal, and it does just give more presence to it. I don't think that it's Paul singing the same line twice, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think it's ADT, and it's a really interesting technique. Again, it's a small kind of production detail, but it makes a difference. You're right. There's no harmonies on this. It's just Paul, but yet more of Paul. And it's really effective. It really does add that extra presence to the vocal track.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting for me, because actually if you spend too long analysing this, you realise it's just a really simple song done very, very well. I mean, the harmony is really impressive. You know, Paul's walking bass lines, fantastic and all of that. But, you've got, verse, and then there's something approximating a chorus, goes into the guitar break, and then we've got chorus, verse, and then that chorus type thing again before the end. But for the first two goes at the verse, we've got that double tracking. We do get some oohs for the chorus, but then when we come back after the guitar break, there is a harmony there as well. So it's almost like they understand. It's that old thing, isn't it? Of you give people the basic elements of the song, and then when you repeat them, you layer in something new in order to make it sound a little more fresh and a little different. And they've got that. They understand that so well, and it's done to such a sophisticated fashion by this stage. Bearing in mind how new they still are. It's genuinely stunning to find them doing that.
No, I completely agree. And the thing is it feels very instinctive as well. One of the great things about this song, I think, is that it feels. I mean, it's almost brash in its confidence, but it is. It like I used that word before, but it is a very confident song, and the way that all these elements slot together does have that kind of instinctual element to it. It doesn't feel like it's something which has been manufactured. It's a Paul McCartney song, obviously. It could not be more Paul McCartney. And that confidence in the lyric, that confidence, like you mentioned, the walking bass line. But you can, there, it's easy to find if you look for it. But there are like isolated tracks from this stuff, and if you just listen to McCartney's isolated bass on "All My Loving," it's astoundingly good. It's sometimes breathtaking how good he is at just being able to knock out this style of bass line. He's just so underrated as just like a talented bassist, but he's really great at it, and all of that radiates through this song.
And you need to have a look at it on some of the live recordings that they've got. In fact, we should mention that sort of thing in a moment, because for the ones that I've seen, he's not looking. He knows what he's doing, and even George at times you can see him just going, I'm just going to look down, fingers in the right, even if it's just an instinctive thing. But Paul was just like, yeah, I understand that I've got to bobble my head and look at the audience as I'm singing at you, and I don't need to look at the fretboard. It's fine, I'm happy. I know where my fingers are. It's just incredible.
It's funny, I was playing bass last week because I was doing a little bit of recording at home. I'm not a very good bass player at all. In fact, I'm a terrible bass player. And it's almost humiliating having my fat fingers plodding up and down the fretboard and then going to watch something. You're quite right. Like the sheer nonchalance of the way that he can do it is astounding. It's also deeply embarrassing when compared to my own half-arsed efforts. But it's just amazing. And he's just so gifted at this instrument, which it wasn't even remotely close to being his first choice of instrument to be playing. It's an astonishing part of this song.
There was I think we said before that I can't quite remember when I became aware of the Beatles, but obviously I was quite aware of Paul McCartney, and I bought Tug of War roughly when it came out, for example. And there is an early video of early video. What am I talking about? There is a video in the sort of the early to mid 80s. I've got a funny feeling it might be that absolute stone cold classic, Spies Like Us. Remember that? Where of course he's playing.
Absolutely.
He's playing all the instruments in the studio while they interweave them with comedy clips from that comedy classic. And just remember then thinking, oh wow, that's really, really impressive. And the joke always used to be about Ringo Starr's not the best drummer in the world. Let's face it, he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles. Now I know that's not true, but Paul is just really talented at everything that he turned to. He was the best musician, in the band, and no doubt that he could play things that the others couldn't, and just pick up a new instrument and get going on it reasonably quickly. It's a fabulous thing to watch, and it's a fabulous thing to think that person was involved in moving on popular music rather than getting involved and drawn into some other form of music.
Yeah, we've been spared the Free Jazz Paul McCartney album, for which I think we can all be very grateful. But I mean, it is just like you sort of mentioned, like Spies Like Us, but I mean that's something which is going to go on and be a feature sort of throughout his career. Like for all that it's not necessarily the best piece of classical music ever written, but like to be able to do something like the Liverpool Oratorio and to be able to go forward and do that kind of writing as well, it does just demonstrate the sheer breadth. I know it wasn't done solo. I know obviously that he had help. I know the whole story behind it, but it's still an amazing thing for somebody to be able to do. And when you pull it right back to kind of 1963, 1964, you can absolutely see the seeds of all that kind of stuff in just this incredible, like nonchalance, just this ability to just do the thing that he needs to do.
Okay, so catchphrase time. Two things there. Firstly,
have we got a catchphrase?
Well, no, I used it a lot in the previous episode, and I just thought, right,
excellent.
Okay, let's keep going with that.
I'm very happy about that.
I wonder how much then of that comes down to the influence of George Martin and the influence that he had on McCartney as a developing musician. And secondly, you said that for all, it's not the best piece of classical music in the world. Was anyone ever claiming it was?
No, I don't suppose anybody was, but I wanted to be. I think it is a good piece of music, but I was trying to not simply oversell it simply because it was written by McCartney. You know,
I just wondered if there was maybe some podcast somewhere where someone was pitching it against Mozart, for example, or a little bit of Beethoven. So today, the Liverpool Oratorio or Beethoven's Ninth.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a podcast out there for something like that. There's probably a podcast out there for everything, but that wasn't particularly my contention. Let's say it that way. But I mean, yes, absolutely. In terms of George Martin's influence, I'm 100% sure that being exposed to that kind of thing is it's just obviously naturally going to be something that he's interested in. I mean, we know going forward, you know, he will do a lot of stuff with sort of music concrete. He did a lot of electronic stuff, which obviously Lennon and Harrison got involved in as well. But you know, he was also involved in some of that stuff too. And you know, I think particularly, I think maybe from 65-ish onward, he's just a sponge. Just everything gets soaked up. Everything gets drawn in terms of influence, in terms of style, in terms of instrumentation, and all of that will carry on sort of radiating out. It's going to have a very significant impact on the music that the band produce going forward. So yeah, absolutely, I would say in terms of George Martin's influence.
So away from George Martin's influence, there something I find quite interesting about this song is that although lyrically the content is really familiar, you know, it's you know, I'm going to be apart from you, but you know, I still love you, blah blah blah, you know, absolute bog standard. There's something about the way that it's written, I can't quite put my finger on it, that just sets it apart from some of those earlier lyrics, whether it's the you know, the future tense, you know, tomorrow I'll miss you, remember I'll always be true, I'll write home every day, I'll send all my loving to you. There's that kind of like statement of intent. I'm not quite sure. I mean, there's the odd little phrase in there that sounds a little bit more sophisticated as well. I can't imagine that 6 to 12 months before he would have written a line like, I'll pretend that I'm kissing the lips I am missing. You know, it's a step up, I think, from what's come before, even if it's within the same, you know, the same realm of, you know, trite pop lyrics about being away from the person that they love.
I think the song that this probably bears the most comparison to is P.S. I Love You, because they're both very much kind of letter songs. You know, I think that's the one that it's probably best to compare it to. And it's clearly more sophisticated than that. It's got a much sharper sort of lyrical twist to it. It's certainly more sophisticated in terms of the way that it's written. And it's a much more confident song than, I use that word again, but much more confident song than P.S. I Love You. It's got that energy and drive. There's something, P.S. I Love You is a bit winsome. I mean, we talked about this on that episode, but it's a perfectly fine song, especially from somebody at that age, at that point in their writing career. But this is just so much more. And that, yeah, particularly that I'll write home every day and I'll send all my loving to you. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely in the same oeuvre. It's a letter song. And it's using that simplicity of rhyme, the kissing, missing, kiss you, miss you. That's giving it its energy. It's exactly the simplicity that makes it work. It's not trying to be clever. It's not trying to be sort of lyrically sophisticated. In fact, it's doing the exact opposite. It's using its simplicity as the kind of driving motor behind the lyric. It makes it very memorable, and it stands out because it is just kiss miss. It's such a simple rhyme scheme. But it's incredibly effective, and it's got that kind of, it's got Ringo's shuffling beat behind it, it's got the walking bass, it's got Lennon's rhythm guitar, and it just all clicks in a way that slightly kind of winsome, slightly kind of precious aspect to P.S. I Love You just doesn't. Yeah, it's way, way better.
Okay. Two things.
It's
not a letter song. It's a song that mentions letters. It's not a letter song. It's
in the same style if it's not a pure example of it.
Okay, all right, you know. Right, just wanted to say that. Secondly, I'm putting you on warning. You've used joie de vivre and oeuvre now. One more of those, and I'm pressing the stop button.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I'll back away slowly from the French.
I mean, yeah, it's a statement of intent, isn't it? It's a statement of just how deep the love is. Although I have to say, if the love's that deep, why is he going away? Does that ever get mentioned? I mean,
I don't believe that it does.
There should be a little something in there, perhaps there's a missing verse in which he says, while I'm away because I need to work because I can't earn the amount of money that I can in Liverpool, wages are much better in Hamburg, blah, 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 blah. And although I'll probably cheat on you because that's what they did in Hamburg, if that's where they're going, and in fact, I don't know just how great they were when they were on tour anyway, I'll still write home to make you feel better, even though, of course, my conscience will be compromised. I'm pretty sure that verse is written down somewhere. Maybe he'll save it till after his death.
It's catchy, I'll give it that.
I need to work on the
might have to work in your rhyme scheme, but other than that, I'm sure you're right. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure you're. I mean, I don't know. Does it need it though? That's the question. Do you think it needs an explanation?
Isn't there some thought that this was written for Jane Asher?
I mean, everything is at this point, isn't it? Probably.
Never confuse the song with the person, I guess, unless they specifically say, I wrote this about.
Indeed. Well, also, you mentioned, I mean, talking about Hamburg there, whatever, you mentioned the live performances of this. The other thing it's worth pointing out in terms of live performances is that this was the first song they played on Ed Sullivan. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. If this is your opening number on the first time that you play the Ed Sullivan show, and this is the song, not even a single, this is the song that you select, that really... Oh, I was going to use French again there. I had to very quickly stop myself from doing it. That really emphasizes how much they invest in this song, just how important it is to them.
And also, bearing in mind that you could argue that for the first few years of their existence, they were regarded as Lennon's band. That for them to do that is that sort of sign that, you know what, Paul's punching his weight. That it's more than just the older boys' band now. It's something for the pair of them to really show their equal talents.
Yeah, well, I mean, this being the third song on With the Beatles, and I'm not going to talk too much about the album because we'll do an episode about that obviously when we get to the end of this. But we've opened with It Won't Be Long and All I've Got to Do, which is a terrific 1-2 punch. But this is McCartney's big impact on the album. This is his statement of intent, and for a song like this to be following two already, really, really strong numbers, we have the idea that this song is strong enough to do this. Next time out, that's not going to be quite as much the case, I think it's fair to say. But it does occupy that position whereby it's alongside two incredibly strong Lennon numbers, and it bears comparison. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a real sign of McCartney kind of stepping up to the plate.
While we're sort of at least closely talking about live performances of this, there are quite a few. I mean, it was a song, unlike the first two on the album, which they basically never played live. This is one that made it into the set and stayed in the set for as long as they were touring. It's one of the most played Beatles live songs, or one of the ones that they played the most. So there's a fair bit of footage out there that you can watch. And I find it really interesting. And this is a sign of just how professional Mr. McCartney is. That on one, I think it's from Indianapolis, for example, he talks about it being a song that they've recorded recently, and it appears on our first Capitol record. And you think, whoa, Paul, okay. Well done. You understand the industry. You understand that although it's obviously on the second album that they recorded, that in America we're doing things slightly different here. But it's also quite interesting that they have a very straightforward introduction to it. But it is quite a formal thing. It's like, oh, hello, good evening, how are you? Here's a song that we've recently recorded and released. We hope you like it. It's called All My Loving. Cheers. Close your eyes. And it's it's still that kind of old school cabaret style introduction, even though they are becoming pop/rock band. But they've still got that sort of the way of doing it that some of those singers had always done. Polite bit of introduction, say the name of the song, and then get started. Years to come, that obviously changes enormously with singers on stage. But just a little sort of insight. Mr. Macca thumbs aloft, as it were, is really just a consummate professional.
Well, and I think a lot of that comes from that sort of variety theatre background as well. That would be, particularly in the UK, that was going to be the dominant sort of performance style. That's what would get broadcast on television in terms of things like Sunday night at the London Palladium. There would have been a lot of kind of, I was going to say end of the pier. That sounds more dismissive than I mean it to, because it is now, but it wouldn't have been then. But, all these kind of places that put on variety theatre, places in Bournemouth and Brighton and Blackpool, all the B's basically. And, that would have been the style that they were going for. That would have been the basically the default approach. But it's amazing also how well it translates.
They don't know anything else at this stage,
Exactly. This is part of that evolution.
Yeah, we haven't really mentioned the others too much, and in fact, what we haven't mentioned is what I think is the one possible blot on the landscape of this song, and that's not down to technique. It's not down to anything to do with the performance. It is down to what I think is the one flaw in this song. And that's the "What the hell were you thinking?" guitar solo.
Oh, I quite like that guitar solo. You don't warm to it.
I just don't think it fits at all. It feels like sort of latter day Peter Buck REM guitar solos, when it's a case of I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. I can't think of a way to get from here to there. I'll just play something that sounds a little bit like something I've done before. Move on. And this case, it's a case of, I'm going to do something that sounds a bit like Chet Atkins and hope that it fits. Well, actually, I don't think it does. I think it's cabaret. I don't think it's pop.
I can see that, but I don't think that it fits particularly badly. And it's given that big kind of plump bass introduction. The big dum dum dum. It doesn't honestly give him a lot of places to go. It kind of it's fed so directly from the bass line that McCartney gives, that lovely little it's when it breaks out of the walking pattern, but it's perky again. It's that little perky bass line, and it kind of feeds straight into George's little guitar line. It is definitely something that he's done before, and we will, I'm sure, mention this many times in many future episodes. But when George doesn't know what to do, he just trots out his little Carl Perkins cliches, and that fills the slot, and away we go. But I don't think at this point in their recording career it's become the kind of cliche that it will do, especially the next sort of 2 or 3 albums. Yeah, Harrison does that a lot before he kind of finds a new way to develop his own cliches, develop his own style. But I don't know. I think it works fine here. It doesn't bother me or feel particularly out of kilter. I do think it's in a different style. I do agree with that part of what you're saying. Yeah. I don't feel that it. I don't feel that it's a poor fit.
Okay, well I suppose we could carry on trying to persuade each other, but I don't think we're going to.
No, I don't think we are.
No, okay. Well,
that's fine. It's good that we don't just agree on everything.
There are some sort of interesting things about this song that I hadn't heard about until starting to read around it. And some of it I'm not sure is especially relevant or, I suppose how much validity there is to it. But did you read that apparently this was the song that was playing in the hospital as John died? It seems like a bit of a weird coincidence.
I have heard that story before, but I'm not. I suppose there's no real way to sort of validate it or invalidate it one way or the other. But it seems a bit. On the one hand, it seems a bit kind of contrived. But on the other hand, if you were going to pick a song that was like, oh, what a spooky coincidence, there was a Beatles song playing when John Lennon died, would All My Loving necessarily be the one that you would go for? Like, even if you didn't go for one that was obvious, surely you would go for like a Lennon song, not like an unbelievably distinctive McCartney song, unless you think he planned the whole thing in the same way that the Queen killed Diana.
Instant Karma, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. It's a weird one. What's your take?
I also think that bearing in mind that if the radio was playing in the background, it's going to be on a radio station that is generally quite popular, and you would have thought that, bearing in mind that Lennon had been making a comeback anyway, that it's not impossible that on a very popular radio station they're going to play music by a very popular band, and they might pick a very popular song by a popular band on that popular music station. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that a radio station they happened to be tuned into was playing the Beatles, and therefore actually the fact that it was All My Lovin' is just pure coincidence.
Yeah, that's a popular opinion.
Okay, good. One thing that I do want to mention though is we start to get into the realm with this as a song of some more interesting covers, and covers that aren't just people doing hey, we're doing some Beatles songs on an album, which is quite interesting. So I suspect you may have listened to it as well, but Prince Buster's version of this, under 2 minutes long, and they deal with the guitar solo by not having the guitar solo, for example, I think is just great fun. And it's slow and steady but rhythmic, and just a wonderful interpretation of the song. Have you heard it?
Well, yeah, of course, and it's following up on those offbeats that Lennon is providing on rhythm guitar, and that fits perfectly with Prince Buster's style. And like Prince Buster, how far wrong can you go anyway? But it's just it's a fantastic cover version, and it's taking that one aspect of the song, amplifying it up essentially to be the primary aspect of the song, and yet still delivering a fantastic version. It's exactly what every single cover version should do, every single good cover version. It's a reinterpretation, but it's also having those key elements of the song which are there in the first place. It's fantastic.
And it works despite the fact that it is substantially slower. I mean, obviously we've spoken before about the fact that so much of the Beatles' output is fast. Even the slow songs are fast, if you see what I mean. But where I was a little disappointed, when doing a search, saying, "Oh, the Arctic Monkeys have done a version." Ooh, okay, this could be interesting. Actually, it kind of is, but it mostly isn't.
Yeah.
And it's a slow down version that's very respectful, and it's perfectly fine, just not very interesting.
I don't think that if you're covering a song like All My Loving, respectful is the way to go. There are some songs where that's perfectly fine. And generally speaking, the simpler the song is, the more likely it is to be respectful. So if you take something like, Something, or Yesterday, or songs like that, they invite respect. They invite that kind of very serious-minded, very emotional, very heartfelt kind of way into the song. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's no criticism of that at all. But that's not what a song like All My Lovin' demands. It's full of energy and life and spark and words that I'm not allowed to say in French, and it just doesn't need to have that kind of respect to it. You should get stuck into it and chew it a bit, and get your fingers under it and get your nails dirty. It's that kind of song, and so that's absolutely what the Prince Buster version does, and that's what's going to make this a good cover version.
Feels like it needs a bit of oomph, and the
oomph is exactly the word.
Yes, yeah. And the other one that seems reasonably relevant to mention is the Amy Winehouse version. Oh, okay, I don't know where that came from. I've only seen I don't know if there was an actual recording of it, but seen a version that she did on the BBC's Glastonbury coverage, sort of a round the campfire version. It's fine. Her voice is fantastic. It doesn't really do much for me in that sense. and it's quite a sort of a soulful, almost sultry version, and there's a load of guitar noodling. It's slow and it's meaningful, but just feels a bit empty for my liking. It kind of feels a bit like, you're just kind of doing what you always do. But I'm sure that there are, I'm not a massive fan of a lot of Amy Winehouse's output, so perhaps I'm just bringing my own preconceived idea to it. It's perfectly fine, and you can tell it's good, and you know she's got a fantastic voice. Just doesn't really do anything.
I think it's definitely a song where if you're going to, I guess it's kind of sort of the same point I made before, really. But technical proficiency is not what this song needs. And for that kind of thing, if you're singing it in like a perfect voice and with perfect pitch, and it's Amy Winehouse, nobody's going to criticize her voice, but that's not necessarily what this song demands. Like, even if you listen to McCartney and those kind of opening lines, he's not quite pitch perfect. He's not quite right on every single note, but the fact that it's a little bit scruffy on the vocal, the fact that it doesn't quite manage to hit, that's what gives it its energy. That's what gives it that extra little lift, and it doesn't need to be. This is a fast-paced song. We haven't talked about Ringo yet, but he's got that shuffling beat going on underneath it, which is just like this non-stop driver all the way through it. And so, McCartney's singing it fairly fast. It's being played fast, and so his vocal isn't 100%, in a heavy inverted commas here, technically perfect, but that slightly scruffy vocal really helps to sell what the song is trying to bring across. Whereas a very technically precise vocal, it does kind of, you can appreciate the skill involved, but it doesn't. You use the word empty, and I think that's probably the right way of putting it. It just doesn't fill the song with anything.
I actually think he has a bum note on the very first note of the song. There's something about that opening that just doesn't sound quite right. But you know what? By the time you've actually thought about it, he's actually onto the second verse, and everything's so bright and fresh and lovely that it doesn't really matter. But then there are plenty of us of a certain generation who are used to imperfect singers and quite happy with imperfect singers, particularly imperfect male singers. I think in general, people are a lot less forgiving of some of the female singers, but I absolutely adore the work of Billy Bragg, Shane MacGowan, Bob Dylan, and there'll be dozens of others who aren't particularly great when it actually comes to the technical side of it, but for whom it just works. And maybe there's some sort of prejudice in there that I'll need to work through. But you know what? Sometimes those imperfect singers just work. There you go. I don't know. That's something I'll come back to time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think you're wrong. And, it's not like McCartney isn't capable of producing a technically proficient vocal. He very, very obviously is, even at this stage in his career. But that's not what this song needs. It's not what it calls for, and that's absolutely fine.
But this is all about subjective judgments anyway. And so, like the fact that Lennon's voice is not technically wonderful. Lennon's voice slightly grates on me in a way that McCartney's doesn't. George Harrison's, I don't think, even he would probably admit he wasn't the strongest singer. I mean, he sings out the side of his mouth, for goodness sake. But it kind of works on a lot of that sort of drawl that he has, kind of works on a lot of his songs. It's subjective, and it's an emotional reaction, and there's something about those very clean singers. I'm not saying Amy Winehouse was, but the ones where the production has kicked in and everything is smoothed over, that just feels to me, and it's so much so that I can't even get a correct word out. All very Simon Cowell.
Oh dear, no, that's harsh words indeed. But I know what you mean. Yeah, that purity just doesn't lend anything to this kind of song. I completely agree.
So we've drifted quite substantially.
As is our want.
So maybe it's a useful thing then to just to kind of bring it back, and while we're then talking about the singing as well, to recognise the fact that actually in that final chorus type thing, there's the a distinct ooh in there where you can feel that McCartney is bringing this to an end. It is one of those songs that does do that, bringing it to a conclusion. And again, you just watching the live videos of them, then playing it, finishing, climax, bow, get ready to play another song, is just actually quite heartwarming.
Yeah, it's another one of those songs that I'm really glad it comes to a proper conclusion rather than fading out. I think fading out would really dissipate the energy that the song has built up. But that, and it's done, and that's it. And it really captures it. It really kind of contains and encapsulates the energy of the song with that kind of ending. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, you're right. Whenever you see McCartney playing this live, he looks so pleased with himself when he gets to the end of it. As well, he should be. I don't mean that as a criticism, but you can just we've done it. We've knocked this one out, boys. It's fantastic. He looks really happy when he finishes playing this song, and it's well earned.
Yeah, I agree, and that's where I bow to him and say, well done, you. We have now reached the high watermark of this album, and for the next few weeks at least, it's kind of downhill.
Yeah, we're going to have a few weeks before we get to anything which is quite going to be able to reach these standards. But before we leave this song, we have to give it a grade. So, what's your mark for this one?
We don't have to.
No, but we're going to. So, what's your mark for this one?
I don't know. I mean, I would need to pause slightly while I quickly have a look at the sheet where I've wrote. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I don't know. If it had a different guitar solo, I'd definitely give it an 8.5. Despite the fact that I object to half marks. I don't know. It's probably an 8, isn't it? If you think, because it's a classic. Although I'm now looking at my ratings and I've only given She Loves You an 8 so far. But I'm giving myself room to for those Stone Cold classics. And I think I did say it was a Stone Cold classic, which is a long way round of saying 8.
8. That seems fair. That's exactly what I'm going to give it. I adore this little song. I think it's very charming. I think it's you say Stone Cold classic. I'm definitely not going to disagree with that. It's got conviction. It's got resilience. It's got energy. It's got life. I think it's as good a little song as you could have, and I'm going to give it an 8.
And as we're virtually at the end, you can throw in another one of those French words if you like.
I'm going to hold it back for next episode, and listeners will just have to wait and see how exciting it is when I make my selection from my limited French vocabulary. I think we can probably wrap things up there then before we offend anyone else, and let's just apologise to our French listeners now. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @Beatles_ology, and you can find more of my writing at www.jgmacquarie.scot. So if you're particularly interested in what I think about TV and movies and music and a whole bunch of other stuff that captures my imagination, that's where you can probably find it. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcast you're using so that more people can find the show. Next week, we will carry on regardless when we plough our way through with the Beatles, which means we're going to feature George's very first song, Don't Bother Me. But until then, keep listening.